Good morning. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to Euston Wall once again. Not really sure what I'm going to be doing today in this video. I'm currently enjoying my morning coffee, free one as a member, as I mentioned before. But yeah, I'm not sure what I'm going to do in this video yet because I've got injured at the weekend, did my finger. So yeah, playing hockey. Suspected dislocated, but it's not, it's actually a tendon problem. But yeah, my finger was sticking out to the side, so that's why it's got this splint to kind of keep it in place now. But obviously, climbing you kind of use your hands, so quite convenient that I've just quit my job and now my job is climbing, and now I can't climb. So, I'm just going to sit here and have a little think about what I'm going to do with this video. Got a few ideas in terms of speaking to some mates of mine that haven't climbed at all. So I might do a very basic video today actually instead, just of kind of the rules of climbing and how you start a route, how you finish a route, with different terminologies, what they mean, that kind of stuff, and also the grading system in terms of what's the most difficult, what's the easiest, that kind of stuff. So have a little think and probably just put a video together. But yeah, I'm out of climbing for now. It's going to be at least a week, so I'm not going to be able to post any new climbing videos until at least a week's time from now. But I'm planning on obviously doing some voiceovers instead of my current videos that I've got, and just giving some technical pointers of why I fell off on certain routes and then why I was successful on those ones as well. So that's the plan. I'm just going to enjoy my coffee for now. If you're wondering on this t-shirt as well, it looks a little bit lighter pink than the other one. This is actually one of the modern fit tees on my website, so slightly different design, slightly different fit, and yeah, this is the medium size logo, just as a little indication of what the medium size logo looks like. This is it, so I thought I'd showcase that for you guys in today's video. But yeah, I'm going to jump into something a little bit later, probably something very basic, maybe do some one-handed climbing for a bit of a technical focus on dead pointing. But yeah, just going to enjoy my coffee for now, and we'll decide that later on. Okay, so I had a little think about what I'm going to be showing in this video today. I'm just going to start with some real basics. I actually thought of quite a few things that someone that's never climbed before wouldn't know about. So I'm going to talk through initially the 3 different styles of wall that you'll be climbing on. So there's 3 of them, like I mentioned. So one is a slab, one is called an overhang, and the other one is called a vertical wall. And they're pretty self-explanatory really. So the first type of wall that I'm going to talk through is an overhang, and this is a clear example of what that is. Clues in the name, the wall itself is overhanging, so this is much more physical. You can see from the angle here that obviously when you're climbing up, you're going to be putting a lot of weight through your hands. That's an example of an overhanging wall. Okay, second type of wall, very self-explanatory, vertical wall. As you can tell by the name, the wall is perfectly vertical, so it's 90 degrees to the ground. Just an example of that, you can see this wall is perfectly straight. It's an example of a vertical wall. The one I'm referring to is this one here. As you can see, to the ground, it's completely perpendicular. And then the last type of wall, as I mentioned, is called a slab. It's essentially the opposite of an overhang. So rather than being overhanging, it's kind of underhanging, if you like. So here's an example of what that slab will look like. As you can see, the angle of it slopes away from the ground. So what this means is you can put a lot more weight through your feet. That's why a lot of the holds in here, as you can see, are much smaller, because it's easier to climb when the wall is obviously sloping away from you. So that's an example of what a slab will look like. So there are the 3 different types of wall. Obviously there's varying degrees to which it can be overhanging or a slab. So obviously the angle of the overhang could be much more steep, which is going to be much more physical, a lot more weight through your hands. Alternatively, on a slab it could be slightly further away from you or slightly more tilted towards you, depending on obviously the climb, but essentially that will affect the route in slightly different ways. But yeah, there's different degrees to which they're overhanging or slabs, but they're all given the same name of either an overhang or a slab. Okay, the next thing that I'm going to talk about in this video is the holds that you use on the wall. So predominantly it's either hand holds or foot holds. Some will be used as both. That's one key way of separating them, is hand holds and foot holds. So obviously holds that you use with your hands, and then holds that you use your feet on the wall with. Okay, So like I say, some of them you will use both for, but generally on most routes you'll use holds for your hands and then other holds for your feet. But in terms of the hand holds, that's what I'm going to talk about more specifically first. There's basically 4 key types of hand holds. So the names of them, they're called either jugs, crimps, slopers, or pinches. They're the 4 key hand holds. I'm going to talk through and show you what each of those ones are, and yeah, how they're used and what they do. Okay, so the first holds I'm going to talk through are called jugs. So here's a quick example of what they look like. Essentially, they're very deeply in cut, lots to grip onto, so your whole hand can pretty much fit in there. Really easy to hold onto. It's called a jug. That's the first type of climb. Generally found only on the easier levels of climbing, so the lower grades. But yeah, that's what a jug looks like. Okay, so the second type of hold that I'm going to talk through now is the crimp. So essentially the opposite of a jug. The more crimpy a hold is, I guess the less there is to hold onto it. So here's a little example of what a crimp might look like. As you can see, I can only get the very front of my fingers onto the hold because it's so slight. The first pad of my finger, if you call each of these sections a pad, it's the first pad is the only bit that can fit on that. So that's called a crimp. They're very good holds when they're in cut like this one is. In cut, but what I mean by that is that the hold goes inwards, it is in cut, as opposed to being outwards. At this kind of angle it goes in, so there's a bit of grip that I can hold onto there. So that's a crimp. Okay, the next hold that I'm going to talk through now is the sloper. So here is a pretty perfect example of what that is. It's on an overhanging route, so you can see from the angle here. It's called a sloper. The reason it's called a sloper is it is literally sloping downwards. So my hand, this is the way I can grip the hold slopes downwards. So that's why it's called a sloper. Now, these are probably my least favourite type of hold. I'm terrible on these. You kind of need surface area and friction is how you hold on to those, as well as very good body positioning. So my hands are relatively small, so I'd much prefer crimps. I'm much stronger in that. These are kind of more suited, I think anyway, to climbers with bigger hands, bigger surface area, more friction. But yeah, that type of hold is called a sloper. Okay, the last type of hold that I mentioned is called a pinch. And here's a pretty good example of what that looks like. So the reason this is called a pinch is because you can grip both sides of it, so one with your thumb and the other with your hands, and you quite literally pinch the hold, so you're squeezing your hands together in this way, pinching the hold in order to stay onto it. So that's the most efficient way to climb on these, is by pinching. That is why that's called a pinch, and that's the final type of hold that I was going to talk through. Okay, so another sort of feature on the wall that you'll see in all climbing gyms is what's called a volume. So there's a few of them on the wall behind me here, on this slab wall. As you can see, they're the big black holes that are screwed into the wall, and they provide some additional features to just alter what the climb is like. So it's these big volumes here. Okay, and most gyms, these volumes will be a part of the routes that are set. So what that means is that on the route you're climbing, let's say I'm climbing a route with only purple holds, I can also use the features of the volume. So I can use those big black volumes as well, and use that to climb up the wall also. Some gyms, they're not included. There's only certain routes that you're allowed to use volumes on, but for the most part you're allowed to use volumes on any route, particularly in the gyms that I climb on anyway. So you'll see me on any route that I climb utilising these volumes as well, in the most effective way possible. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to talk through now is how to start a route. So you'll notice in all the climbs that I do and all the videos that I've got, I will start with 2 hands on the wall and both my feet off the floor in that. So in order to start the route, you have to be set in that start position. Now there's 2 start holds, or 1 start hold, and it will be indicated in your gym either by some tape, or we've got these little tags in the gyms that I climb in. So this one tells me how difficult the climb is, and also that's where I put one hand, and then the other one shows obviously the other start hold. So on an example of one, this one here, I've used 2 hands to start, both hands on this. An example of one where 2 hands are separate is this one here, this black climb. So it's a V1, that's the grade. I have one hand on this hold, and my other hand would start down here on this hold. So that's the 2 start holds that you must start on to begin your climb. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to talk through is the different grades of climbing. So a few mates that I've spoken to that don't climb at all have asked me what I mean by the grades when I'm saying, you know, V1, V8, what does that actually mean? So I'm just going to use this little table here to talk through what the grades are. So there's a couple of different grading systems. The one that I use is the V grade system. That's how they're set in most gyms in England, and how they are on here. So as you can see at the top here, we've got VB. This is the easiest grade. Okay, so VB or V intro, essentially the easiest form of climbing. So most of the holds on these walls will be jugs, and it'll be set in almost like a ladder, very, very straightforward, as easy as it is to climb. And obviously the higher the number, the more difficult it becomes. So it goes V0, V1, all the way through to V15 is kind of the last one shown on here. I think the highest is V17. But yeah, in most climbing gyms, you're not really going to see much above a V10. That's probably kind of the highest grade you're going to see. Most gyms, I guess, up to V8, they'll have a lot that go up to V8, and then there's fewer V9, 10, 11 for sure. But yeah, so it's obviously easiest at the top here, hardest at the bottom. So yeah, that's how this grading system is set. Now you might see a lot of this font bouldering grade. I think this is more common and more universal. I'm not as familiar with it myself, which is why I use the V system. But yeah, you can see kind of the equivalence of those grades in this table here. So you can see obviously V10, 7C+, V8, 7B or 7B+. Yeah, they're a bit more comprehensive, these ones, I suppose. Like within the grade, V5 could be a 6C or a 6C+. If it's a slightly easier V5, it will be a 6C. If it's a slightly harder V5, it will be a 6C+. So that's kind of the grading system and how it works. Same with both of them. The lower the number, the easier the climb. The higher the number, the harder the climb. Okay, so if you're brand new to climbing as well, a couple of things that you might not be aware of that are really quite important when you first turn up at a climbing gym are things like making sure you don't get in the way of other people to ensure their safety and your safety, for example. So don't climb on a route if somebody else's route is going to cross paths with yours. So a little example of that, if you look at the white route on the wall here, this V1 goes all the way along up here, up to the top hold there. And you'll see there's obviously several other routes like the purple route and the black route and the red route that kind of intercross with that white route. So if somebody is climbing or looking like they're about to start the white route and they're climbing all the way up here, make sure you don't start climbing on the black route or the purple route or the red route until they've finished the climb, because otherwise you're going to get in their way. And even if you don't actually fully get in their way, what you'll do is you'll put them off. So if you're not actually climbing directly underneath them, you're a little bit to the side, you'll still be in their eye line. It's going to mess up their climb for them. So be respectful of other people that are climbing, recognise where their route's going and where your route's going before you start climbing to make sure you don't get in the way of them. Okay, so I'm just going to do a quick take on how you start and finish a route, and also what a route actually looks like on a wall. So you can see here the 2 start holds on this orange. So that means you start with 2 hands on this hold. This S means start, and the V7 is obviously the grade. Now each route is colour coordinated, and every gym you go to, every boulder is colour coordinated. So one route here is the orange route. So we'll start with 2 hands on this hold. You can use the foot holds and the volume as well to place your feet to start on the wall. And you obviously then climb up, and the way you finish is by matching the top hold. So the top hold is this hold here, as you can see. It's the one that's highest on the route. Matching essentially means getting 2 hands to touch that hold. So you have to be in a set position, and both your hands must be touching that hold in a set way in order for you to finish the route. That's how you start and finish climb. Okay, the other thing that I love about climbing is that there's seemingly an unwritten rule that there's no dickheads allowed. I don't know how this is the case in climbing, but I've genuinely never met any people that I don't get on with in a climbing gym. Everybody is very positive. Everyone encourages everybody on the walls. Yeah, it's just a really great environment to be in. So obviously if you're joining a climbing gym, if you're new to climbing, if this inspires you to go and join, make sure that you apply that rule as well. No dickheads allowed. I think I just slipped through the net myself. But yeah, essentially there is an unwritten rule, no dickheads allowed, and that's why we love climbing. Okay, so the other fantastic thing about bouldering in particular, climbing in general, but more specifically for bouldering, is how minimalistic it is for you to be able to start and how accessible it is. So in terms of equipment that you need, you don't really need any equipment at all. When you turn up to the gym, you can rent some shoes, some climbing shoes, but obviously the more you climb, it's more cost effective to buy your own. And the only other thing that you really need is chalk. I'll talk through what chalk is so important for later on, but essentially the only two things that I need to bring to the gym with me are my climbing shoes and my chalk bag. And funnily enough, inside my chalk bag is just chalk. So that's all that I need, is my climbing shoes and my chalk bag, and to take nothing else to the gym with me. Very simple, very easy. Okay, so I mentioned obviously chalk. This is what we use with climbing. Very similar to gym or weightlifting in terms of the reason for using chalk is to just increase the friction between your hand and the hold. So what the chalk does is it absorbs your sweat. Obviously when you're climbing, physical exercise, your hands will sweat quite a lot. So what the chalk does is it absorbs the sweat and stops that slippery layer of sweat from getting between your hand and the hold, which will make it much harder to grip onto. The chalk just absorbs that and allows you to increase the amount of friction between your fingers and the holds by absorbing that sweat and stopping it from getting in the way. Now you might be thinking that you've seen people brushing chalk off of holds. So why does what I say apply when people are brushing chalk off of the holds? Essentially, there is an optimal amount of chalk that you can have, and too much chalk can actually have the opposite effect of what you're trying to use the chalk for. So if there's too thick a layer of chalk on a hold, what that means is that the chalk, it kind of acts like a layer of dust, and essentially it makes it more slippery. So the chalk itself will slide over itself, which means that your hand will slide off with that. So why we brush holds is to essentially reduce the amount of chalk that's on the hold, to minimize it, and so that all it's really doing is absorbing the sweat from your hand and not being too thick of a layer that it slides over itself, causing you to come off the hold as well. Okay, probably going to end the video there. I hope for anybody that's not climbed before, that was quite helpful in understanding a lot of the terminology in particular that I've been using, which is very climbing specific. Hope I explained what each hold is, obviously definitions of different styles of climbing, things like that very well, so you understand it all. And yeah, I just hope you found it useful. It's more for beginner climbers. Just thought I'd put this video together because obviously with my finger, I can't really do anything else right now, so hopefully this is useful to some people that are watching. But yeah, really appreciate you watching. Would obviously appreciate as well if you'd like, subscribe, comment down below what you thought of it. But yeah, as always, most importantly, make sure you grab life by the plums, and I'll see you in the next video.